What makes a city skyline Greek? If I had to draw one from scratch, I'd start by the sea. There'd be a clustered neighborhood of little white houses and a domed chapel on a hill, a nearby town center with those tiny little storefronts under apartments. Gotta have some hills with ancient Greek ruins and groves of olive trees surrounding the city, all with that sun-soaked Mediterranean color palette. Yeah, must. Now that is what I'm talking about. Hey everyone, Mike from Xucaboa here, taking part in my third year of Skyline6, a collaborative city build where a ton of talented Cities Skylines creators take turns adding their own creative ideas to a themed city build. This time, it's European Adventure. If you don't know what this is, Cities Skylines 1 is a video game from 2015 where you just build a city. Some people enjoy playing it as a silly game, others use it as 3D modeling software, and most of us are somewhere on the spectrum in between. This year in Skyline 6 we have an incredible lineup of some major talent, and each Sunday the next in line will premiere their city creation. Links to everyone's channels are in the description. Last year in Skyline 6 I built a nearly one-to-one recreation of the Alhambra in Spain. That was a lot of fun and massively challenging. This time, I thought I'd do something technically similar, but more of a creative concept than a rigid replica. Like, what feels Greek to me, a non-Greek American who lives in Portugal? I tried to record building this step by step, but even if I had sped up the footage 15 times, it would still be over 4 hours long, so I'm just gonna take you through each area and show you what I did and how I did it. Alright, the Waterfront. Before I begin explaining what I did, let me just say thank you and excellent work to both Brad Plays Cities, who made this Skyline 6 European Adventure billboard asset, and Teddy Radko, who made custom flags for each of this year's creators. I wanted to put them right here in front of the ferry stop, and I put these flags here because it reminds me very much of one of my favorite spots in Lisbon, Portugal, where I'm living, which is right across from the docks of Alcantara. There are all of these flags lined up, and then you have the stairs going up to the park and the jacaranda trees blooming. So this is a subtle, not specifically Greek homage to one of my favorite locales here in Europe, where you might find me chilling out on any given day. Anyway, okay, if you don't play this game or don't know all the stuff I'm talking about, I promise this will be very satisfying to watch. The techniques I use build upon each other, so by the time we get to the top, you'll already be an expert. First thing I'm going to point out is that I detailed underwater. Not very heavily, but I added some vegetation and some decals, and let me tell you why. Greece is known for its crystal clear Aegean waters, but the default terrain texture here was pretty yellow, and it just made the whole area feel kind of dirty. What I did was I took this destroyed decal number 4 and basically just stretched it out. I'm able to do that because we are using the prop control mod in this project, and if you have that enabled, among other things, you can hit the period and comma keys to grow and shrink most props and decals. I also use this square, bluish mid-century modern decal underneath the boats. So just using 2 different decals, I was able to cover a lot of area, and since it's underwater, any little texture glitches don't really matter. If I switch my LOD settings here really quickly, you can see how few decals I used and how yellow the bottom looked. Now that is what I'm talking about. Next to the ferry terminal, which is a standard in-game asset, I made my own custom marina because Greece is full of boats. It's a fact. To do that, I first used some bridge pillars. Let me show you what I mean. Using these, I just put them side by side and lined them up to make a wall. Pretty simple. And they look great because they have a very high detail texture applied to them. These are from the Bridges and Piers pack by Armesto, and they work magnificently here. For the docks, I used a prop that I had resized. Let me show you by copying one and placing it in the air here. It is the roof walkway. I used the longer and the shorter ones to make the docks here, and they really did a nice job because they don't have pilings that go all the way down, which I thought would ruin the look that I was going for. I added some little life ring buoy props in a few places you'd find them. And most important detail of the marina are the boats. Some of you may know where to find the boats, but if you don't feel bad because it's not that intuitive. If you open up Find It and look for boats, you won't find any. I made a custom tag here for myself, for boat stuff, and I have no boats in it. That's because the boats are sub-buildings and you need to expand the little plus button and select the sub-building drop-down. When you do that, you get some invisible icons, but each one of them is a floating boat or floating building. You just have to click to see which is which. Here I put a jet ski rental to fill in this area between the two docks, and also because its building kind of works with the dock and also the quay wall and boardwalk, which I put on top of the quay wall. Using the node controller mod, I'll just show you that I did a subtle amount of stretch on the end of the street here, just to 122%, to make this dead end a little more bulbous. And if I lift up the boardwalk, you can see how I just shifted it on top of the quay wall. I use a fair amount of quay walls in this build, also from the Bridges and Piers pack by Armesto, so to keep them from getting too monotonous, I add things to try to make each one of them unique and different. Not much to say about these buildings, except that I thought they fit in nicely here. If I had had more time, or if I was using procedural objects, I would have tried to do a little more here, honestly. But this works. However, another trick I use to detail is place some decals on the quay walls. You see, by dragging decals over them, you get this distorted band. You can't do it everywhere, but it works on the quay walls, and so I sprinkle some graffiti detailing around where I was able. Just some little things to add to the authenticity of the scene. So here we are in the old town made of the little white houses. While they mostly have the same ingredients, each house is custom built and unique in its own way. Like, here's an umbrella that I enlarged to make a domed roof, for example. And moving over to the other side, actually, wait a second. Let me also point out that along the quay walls here, I added a hanging vegetation prop. It's very low intensity, but frames the scene with a splash of color that I really think adds some charm and keeps this whole area from becoming too whitewashed. But you can see here that I lightly sprinkle props around, like pergolas and plants. Here's a yellow awning made from that old ice cream van prop that I just hid inside of the cube. Again, just trying to give small splashes of color here and there. And I can't show this neighborhood and not mention Dirty H, who will be one of our guest builders this season. He has built his own European-themed series with way more mods than we're using here, and his Santorini-style build is just next level. He's a true artist. I'm absolutely thrilled he'll be joining us, so I put this little flag here just for him. You see now how low quality these textures are compared to what they could be. But remember that passing a save file between 16 different people will require things to be pretty low intensity. Our mods and custom assets lists are very lightweight. You can see the links to each of the collections in the description. Okay, let me show you the actual cube I used for the houses, because this is a great prop to use in a lot of places if you're creative. It is from the Modern City Center Creator Pack by Ambi Polizei, kind of a secret prop used for the buildings, but with Find It you can use it by itself. It is resizable, and it glows a lovely white at nighttime, which I didn't expect. For the windows, each of them are made up of the same three parts. The window part is the little rounded dormer prop. The top awning piece is the ice bench prop, which I thought was perfect with the blue and white colors for a Greek theme. And the bottom piece is this bench prop. I put them all together and saved them as a move-it export so I could just place them together. Honestly, it was very tedious to place all the windows in a random assortment, but I did my best and I think it came out pretty good. Now for the stairways. I mean, what is Europe if not millions of random stairways making life absolute hell for people with mobility issues, am I right? These ones are made of two elements. The first part is the park path, in this case I used the zoo path, And the second part is this monorail pylon prop. I didn't place each step individually, of course. I used the prop line tool that is now integrated into the prop control mod, and I set the angle 90 degrees and the spacing to 1. Following the terrain gets it close, but then I set the height of the top and the bottom ones and used Move It to line up the objects. You could use a number of different flat-topped assets to do this, but I chose these because of their color and because they have low-resolution textures that won't overload my GPU when I'm stacking so many together. And now, with the stairs and houses, I get varying contrast values depending on the lighting because of all the different angles, and that adds depth and dimension to my otherwise monochromatic neighborhood. If we had the Prop Painter mod in our collection for this series, I would have loved to make this a much more vibrantly colored scene, but this still looks really nice and I'm very happy with how it came out. The little domed chapel on the hill. So first off, you can see that the windows are just enlarged dormers, the same props that were used on the white buildings down in the old town. For the dome, I used the very common park gazebo prop. For the building walls, I used more pillars from the Bridges and Piers pack. This European Rail Bridge number 2 pillar for the outer walls, and the American 6-lane stone bridge pillar for the main building. Let me show you what it looks like over here. Very large pillar, it's like building size, so it works well. I just needed the one. Now, for the light turquoise roof, this is pretty unique. It has a low resolution texture, so you guessed it, it's an oversized prop. I used the well prop and just put 2 of them next to each other. You can see how this would be very versatile for adding this roof to some other buildings as well. The front doorway is just 2 props, the monorail pylon for the column portal and the food truck for the doors. All I did was make the food truck a little bigger and put it right in the middle there. The way I'm getting people to walk around here is with tourist paths, if you're wondering. There are no game mechanics that make people want to just look at a bridge pillar otherwise. Placing the chapel here on top of this old town is another way that I'm trying to add some dynamic contrast to the area. This brings in some more rich colors with the dome and the roof, which are a similar hue with different values, and the shading created by the windows and entryway adds some more contrast. It stands out as a centerpiece of this corner of the town and brings some balance to the edge. Here I put a Teddy Radko flag because this chapel, while not exactly the same, reminded me very much of his Church of Move It from his Mio series. He and I have worked together before on a few different projects, and I'm really happy he'll be joining us in Skyline 6 this season. So here in what I'll call the new town, for lack of a better term, we'll start at the bottom by this kind of park plaza roundabout thing. Now I made the roundabout with the help of the node controller mod in order to get the smooth corners. Here in the planters along the quay wall are one of the few custom assets that I will use, the red tulips cluster. I mixed them with some green plant props and put them on top of a monorail pylon. I had to copy and paste them in place because otherwise the network gets activated and turns red. In the middle of the roundabout, I put a tiny park building with the little gazebo option. As far as the storefronts under the apartment buildings, I didn't often have to change much, but wherever it made sense, I'd add a prop facade. When we moved this one out of the way, you can see it was just a dumpster area under there. Over on this side, I made some custom steps out of the gravel bridge pillars to account for the terrain, and just to make it look a little livelier. When we move everything out of the way, you can see it's pretty empty and boring otherwise. Some of these streets up here are dead ends. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to create many city blocks in a tight, steep area like this. This street right here is loosely based on the street that I live on in Lisbon. Another Lisbon feature here are the jacarandas, which are in bloom here from late April through May. I added some prop grass underneath them for texture, and instead of using the network feature like I did with these pear trees, I used a grassy median and individually placed the jacarandas just a little smaller than they usually are because I felt like they were crowding the street. Just continuing using a variety of generically Mediterranean passing buildings along the streets. By using the building control mod, I'm able to select no terrain flattening option, which is very helpful at a place like this. Here at the football field, we got the hometown Spartans representing, a nice Greek-themed billboard from the game. Now, this was kind of a strange little hill on the map, and rather than modify it or get rid of it, I just put a little ancient ruin on top. Very similar to the other ruins I'll show you, but just a little smaller. Time for the palace. I'll point out these two key walls, the lower one which uses a different texture and also curves and slopes down, and the upper one which has sharp corners. The way I did this is just by using the node controller mod again, and adjusting the offset to 0. The default offset I think is 12 and it creates that rounded corner, but here with 0 the whole area is, in the words of Joy Builds Cities, acute. You can see down here how using the decal trick with some parking decals created new interesting shapes for graffiti. And this asset for the building is just the insect, amphibian, and reptile house from the Park Life Zoo. I covered up the zoo sign with this Aquila prop. In the backyard, I made a geometric head shape, and that is directly from my Alhambra build last August. I designed a bunch of head shapes for the gardens and saved them to move it using the export feature. So now if I ever want one, I could just take from that collection. Also, in the backyard, I used these 3 tall, skinny boreal pine trees, because European palaces always have these tall, skinny trees, and that's the closest one I could find with the trees that we have. Speaking of the trees that we have, the cluster of bushes, the leafy farm bush, the stone pine set, and the red tulip cluster. Those trees are the only ones I use on this side of the build, and I just used a few other ones for the farm fields that I'll show you in a bit. As for the aqueduct, this is also a design I made last year in the Alhambra build, which I called the Alradco. Now, you might be saying, but Xucaboa, aqueducts were Roman, not Greek. And I'll counter your argument by retorting the word Byzantine. And you'll say, Eastern Roman Empire? And I'll say, this is just pretend, like chill out. Come on, these aren't real. Maybe it's from Venetian or Ottoman times. Greek history spans many thousands of years, right? Aqueducts could have popped in there at some point, I don't know. Anyway, this tower is kind of like a big water reservoir that the aqueduct connects to. Now, you'll notice I have a train station on the right and a little tunnel under the street here, which I'll show you a little bit later on. For now, I'm going to stick to this area. Moving over to the farms now. These are very basic on a technical level, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be unique and specialized. In this farm, I used the vanilla orange trees. Ooh, vanilla orange. That reminds me of a tasty orange creamsicle. I think I'll grab one after this video. Under the trees, I put some of those sparse vegetation props that come with the game, and with the house, I chose this postmodern cubist-looking house from the Heart of Korea content pack by Elvis. I think it's postmodern anyway. Let me know with a comment if I got that right or wrong. I thought it was a very cool take on a farmhouse, and it fits in nicely with the Greek aesthetic I'm trying to make. Now, these three hills, including the one with the ruins on it, were here with the map, and I thought they were super wonky, but I mean, Greece has all kinds of crazy geology, so I kept them, and I'm glad I did. I think they add some great character to the spot. This second farmhouse is lightly detailed as well. I chose a little farm shed and a more traditional looking farmhouse with the orange terracotta roof. To the left of it is this tiny park asset, and you can choose between 4 different variants of the park. So here I chose the planters that look like some kind of organic herbs and small plants, and I put next to it this potted plant prop. Uh-oh, I could have lowered that well prop down a little more. Ay caramba. But anyway, just behind it, I put these small tanks that I believe are special industry assets, if I remember correctly. Just to be like tanks or silos for the crop harvest and its byproducts. Whatever you want to pretend that this crop is. As for the crops, I use this low poly variant by PD Elmo, or Pidelmo, not sure which one that is. It's just a little bit smaller and less resource intensive on my PC than the Wild Hedge that comes with the game now. I did use the Wild Hedge by Mr. Mason for detailing little places everywhere else though, so that this crop still looks distinct. And finally, over to the olive groves. Again, I used a tiny park and a farmhouse. And for the trees, I used the workshop trees, Olive 2 and Olive 3. They're relatively low try count, each under 1,000 tries, so not too intense, and I don't feel bad placing a whole lot of them. Olive tree number 3 is kind of unique looking, so I only use that one 2 or 3 times because it's so different. And I followed the curvature of the hill when lining them up rather than making them perfectly straight lines. I didn't want it to be too rectilinear, give it a very free-flowing thing, but it's still, planted and organized. Let's look at the amphitheater at the base of the Acropolis. In this instance, I did take direct inspiration from the location of the Herodion at the foot of the Acropolis of Athens. Taking a look at it in Google Earth, we see exactly where it is in relation to the Acropolis cliffs. It was renovated after about 1,800 years of being left in ruins, and now events are held there all the time. So the large columns I use are made of pedestrian path elevated pillars, and the small ones are those handy monorail pylon props with some other bridge pillars for the structure. I wanted to leave it simplified and more open here than the real building because it would get really dense with detailing really fast, and honestly I don't think there's any reason to have that here. Having it look cleaner and more open is nicer in this context. The tricky part of this was building the seating area. I used the quay wall with the big steps, but as you see, it's much flatter than what we want. So again, using the node controller mod, I had to play around with the corner elevations in the freeform mode. Let me grab a corner here and show you what I mean. I ended up making certain corners minus 20 meters of elevation, and that gave me the steepness that I was looking for. Then I just copied and pasted the quay wall once again to get another layer. Now, there were some minor imperfections that thankfully the flat grayish color hides pretty well. But also, these lampposts are now floating in the air where they want to be normally, I guess. If we were using the Network Skins mod, I could have just removed those entirely. But honestly, did you even notice until I said so? Right? Like, don't worry about that sort of thing. Over on the corner here, I added another quay wall with some American pedestrian bridge pillars to create an excavated site effect, just like I did last year in the Alhambra video, and I put that same underwater decal here too for a pebbly look on the ground. Finally, welcome to the Acropolis. Now that you know the techniques that I used below, this is going to seem like a piece of cake. The first thing I want to point out is how I did the cliff textures. Just take these vanilla cliff rocks, and since they are terrain conforming, they'll bend and wrap around any terrain you have. This is nothing new for veteran players of the game, but it's a vanilla trick that a lot of people simply don't take advantage of enough. Now, this next part is definitely not a vanilla trick, and it was much more difficult than the other stairs I did before. See how these are a straight slope on a ground level path? That isn't too hard to get right once you know how. But here, the path is elevated in order to get on top of the cliffs, with multiple twisting nodes and different height angles. See all the nodes here? I've got 5 nodes twisting and bending the segments between them. When I went to place each one, they really distorted the path segments in a way that makes the people disappear way too much when they're walking, and the railings get really curvy and weird. With each node, I had to mess around with the node controller settings in order to get it working right, which took a lot more trial and error than I expected. Also, I used the European rail bridge pillars as steps instead of the monorail props like I did everywhere else. The reason was to fill in the gaps between the cliffs and the path. Now, these are much larger assets with a bigger texture file, so I was nervous to stack this many together. But the performance hasn't suffered noticeably, so I wouldn't recommend doing this if you don't have to, alright, just to be safe. I mean, honestly, this is a much better suited project for procedural objects than these, but we're not doing a PO build here. At the top of the stairs, I built the ruins of a propylaeon, which is what you call the grand entrance of different acropolis. And right behind it, there was a little dip in the terrain that I couldn't quite smooth out for some reason, so I just put a small bridge over it and made it part of the ruins. Now we're on top of the Xucaboa. To make the Parthenon building was pretty simple. I just enlarged those monorail pylon props and got them all nicely lined up together. Underneath them, I put a base of bridge pillars on top of a key wall pedestal with 90-degree corners. Inside, there are a few debris props, and voila, our iconic monumental landmark is overlooking our town. With the key walls going around, I rounded some corners off and squared off some others. And also made it so they weren't all the same height, so it gave some roughness to the terrain. This way I could take advantage of the little dips and make some excavated ruin areas. Now, this is going to seem a little off topic, but I really think my favorite part of detailing this entire town was the use of these generic pine trees. They are from the Mr. Mason Vanilla Update, and they not only look great in general, but they really punctuate the open area on top, as well as all around the build with some dark value green hues in a very light value build. As I mentioned earlier, I put in a train station on this side of the build, and right now here are my 2 bus lines joining up to it. The minibus serves the local area and the orange bus goes out of town. I set up a commuter bullet train line that goes to the primary train hub of our city so far. To get there, the tracks tunnel under this mountain and past Joy-Build City's area of Bloom Island, the tranquil, car-free destination just next door. At Bloom Island, another ferry line was added that goes back and forth to our Greek docks, as well as to our shared Discord server, the City of Friends, which we all hope you drop in sometime. The train tunnel emerges in this narrow pass in the mountains, carefully graded to satisfy even the most hardcore trainiacs. It tunnels quickly again through the mountain into this field before crossing the river at the top of the island. Here, I actually used bridge pillars to make better bridge piers that add some protection from people like me, a guy whose job it is to drive 300-meter container ships across oceans and under bridges all around the world, from doing some unintentional power slides into critical infrastructure. The train line continues over to Flyvox's main train station. If you have to commute to work in a train, car, or even a container ship, you should listen to Flyvox's podcasts where he interviews tons of Cities Skylines creators. The Spotify link is in the description. When we swing over this way, we see the train line also connects up to Raid Kitty's wedding destination in the mountains. I do hope you are all caught up on the playlist so you can see which builder will catch the Skyline6 bouquet and build next. Wrapping back around, we go to The Dog, named for my original gangster, Cities by Steven's dog, Lord Kevin. This is an awesome walled medieval town worthy of a rewatch, just like pretty much every video Steven's ever made. There is now a direct ferry connection to our Greek destination that takes the boat under the bridge. Watch out. If you follow the bridge back my way, you'll see the wavy diamond interchange that was put in before is now modified to include this photorealistic, lifelike portrait of my cat Xuca, who inspires me every day to be creative and think outside the litter box. This project was freaking awesome. With less than 7 short days to build this and 5 days to make this video, I found myself going back to my creative roots, trying to reinvent this game that remains one of my all-time favorites. Thinking of this as an artistic drawing rather than a typical city build has rejuvenated my passion for it, and I hope some of that has spread around to all of you. There is no limit to the creativity if you're playing vanilla like I did for so long, or if you're hoping to make something that looks just like real life. We'll be taking a short break next week, and then Brad Plays Cities will be next. Check out the playlist, subscribe to all the builders, and, as always, I'll see you next time.